Coming up in today's newscast, Israel transfers massive humanitarian aid to Syrians trapped in the latest round of violence. 4 female Israeli soldiers make history as the Army's first tank commanders. And good news, NBA fans, Israeli star Omri Casspi has officially found a new team. The latest round of fighting in the Syrian civil war has displaced more than 160,000 Syrians from the country's southern region. That's more than triple since the last major wave. With more and more civilians getting caught in the crosshairs, scores of Syrians have flocked to the southern Syrian border, with Israel hoping to escape the bloodshed. Israel, for its part, has said that although it will not take in refugees, it has already transferred several dozen tons of humanitarian aid through Operation Good Neighbor. This covert IDF operation has already been underway since 2013, sending food, water, blankets, and infrastructure to Syrian villages devastated by the bloody civil war. Over the weekend, the military confirmed that nearly 28 tons of food, 300 tents, and over 30 tons of clothing has been delivered to help ease the suffering following the last escalation of violence. Syrian President Assad's army has been trying to crush rebel forces throughout the region for over 8 years now, with the death toll approaching apocalyptic proportions. IDF forces have also just coordinated the transfer of 6 injured Syrians, including 4 recently orphaned children, to Israeli hospitals in the north. This medical aid has been a major part of Operation Good Neighbor, one that the IDF sees as a win-win for all sides. It not only gives crucial life-saving aid to those who need it most, but hopefully also builds bridges with Syrians who leave the hospital with a newfound hope for peace with their Israeli neighbors. Unfortunately, this violence we're seeing is only expected to get worse and worse. For that very reason, Israel's Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot is currently in the United States for meetings with his American equivalent, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Joseph Dunford. Joining us now with more on the latest developments in Syria is Dr. Nir Bohms, a research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. Dr. Bohms, thank you for joining us as always.
Great to be here.
So my first question is, Operation Good Neighbor has been going on for, many years now. Why does Israel do this? Is it just out of goodwill? It's the right thing to do? There's a strategic reason to do it? Tell me about it.
It's a combination of both. First of all, it is the right thing to do. And Israel had started doing this since 2013 officially, but NGOs, Israeli NGOs, have been there literally from day one, working inside Syria, working in Jordan, working in Turkey, in refugee camps, in 12 different projects that Israeli NGOs have been participating in the realm of humanitarian aid. When it comes to the military, of course, there is more than that. There is a zone of influence in the southern part of Syria. There are relationships with the rebels. And de facto, what we've learned also from cases like that of Bejan, one of the rebels' enclave that was taken by the regime at the end of last year, that the minute that these rebels leave, the people who take their place are pro-Syrian regime militias, really pro-Iranian militias, and really people who are far less friendly to Israel, which is partially also why the military is involved in this.
Right. Well, that leads me to my next question. Does Israel have a dog in this fight? Does Israel want to see Assad win over the rebels, or vice versa? Would they rather see the rebels kind of come out on top?
Well, if it was just the rebels or Assad, then it would have been a very easy equation. But it's not Assad. It's what's the baggage that Assad brings with him. Assad may have won. Iran Assad may have won the war, but really the war was won for him. And when we're looking at the Iranian militias taking Syrian uniform, moving down south, then the understanding is that the minute that this particular status quo is gone, what we're seeing here is actually an extension of the Lebanese border, with militias like Hezbollah and other militant groups across the border, which may be far less friendly to Israel. So I think in this point, if Israel had a choice, and I don't think it actually does, but if Israel had a choice, it would have been rather content with the previous status quo, when you have a buffer zone of rebels that are trying also to keep particularly the pro-Iranian forces outside the border.
Right. Now I've got to ask, because you said something that I agree with, which is that this is providing aid. It's the right thing to do. What would it take for Israel to take in refugees, to take in some of these displaced people who need shelter, who need a home? What would it take for Israel to do that? Is that possible? Is that a reality?
We have seen plenty of things that have not been possible, including the entire humanitarian operation. Very few people thought that Israel would do what it actually did. Right. And just to remind you, Lebanon, 2000, September of 2000, Israel actually gave entry for 7,500 member of the Lebanese forces, the South Lebanese army, really the Phalange, preventing Hezbollah from getting to them. Israel felt more committed and responsible because it has former relationship with them. But I think that the comparison is not completely out of place. Israel had worked with these people for the last 5 years. It has some responsibility, particularly if what we'll have there is a scenario where there's going to be an attempt of massacre or targeting of people, particularly because perceived or not that they're going to be blamed by collaborating or working with Israel.
Right. Now, as we see this crisis growing, as we see more and more fighting, and even just today, the IDF just boosted the number of troops that they have on the northern border in the Golan region. Is it possible that we're going to see this violence spill over into Israel?
So far, the IDF has been fairly effective in its task to prevent this war from going to Israel. Every time when there was a spillover, there was a very precise and quick response.
Right,
I think we will continue to do that in order to prevent some spillover. However, if the battles will indeed move further to the south, which is one more reason why a buffer zone was important, I believe we'll see more spillovers, and we may see Israel being called to respond or to intervene. Right. And also, we have to also understand, if indeed there's going to be an attempted massacre on refugees standing right opposite our border and standing literally on the fence, I think also Israel may be compelled to respond.
Wow. I mean, this is just a really tough situation to watch. I know that everyone's paying attention to this very closely, and obviously our thoughts are with the refugees and with Syrians displaced, so we'll have to see where this goes. Dr. Bohms, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Hundreds of thousands of demonstrators have just taken to the streets to protest U.S. President Donald Trump's immigration policy. This weekend saw nearly 700 marches take place across the country, and this was all a rally against Trump's controversial immigration policies employed at the U.S.-Mexico border, which is why demonstrators held signs that read, "No more children in cages, no borders, no nations, no deportations," and "What's next? Concentration camps?" ILTV's Aaron Porras is here with more on this story. Now, Aaron, last month Trump did sign an executive order putting an end to those child-parent separations at the border. So that's not exactly what all these rallies are about, right?
True, amid massive bipartisan pressure, I will say, by the way. But that doesn't really solve the issue. 2,000 children are already separated at the border, and they still have yet to be reunited with their families, and they're still actually being held in detention facilities along the border. This has gone on for weeks now, and more than that, new families may not be separated anymore, but that just means more children in detention facilities with the adults they came with.
Right, and obviously this is still seen as a kind of a problematic solution, but we're also seeing, kind of an overall call now to abolish the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office altogether, right?
Yeah, there have been many calls to abolish ICE, and as you stated earlier, to open the border completely, etc. So basically no immigration control, and that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
But the abolishment of ICE, which was only created in 2003 in response to 9/11, who knows? Ultimately, that's for Congress to decide, which is actually in line with what ICE is saying. Now, originally, we had multiple agencies in charge of overseeing various aspects of border security, immigration, investigations, etc. ICE is basically just a consolidation of those agencies. So to abolish ICE would likely just mean going back to a similar setup that we had before, and those agencies weren't without issue either.
Right, but I will say that those agencies are not and were not ever really under the microscope here, due to the fact that they didn't separate families en masse until now, as they have so far under the Trump administration, right?
Well, you're right about that, and that's why we're seeing such a huge turnout. At the end of the day, even though a lot of the protesters are just generally anti-Trump, the vast majority are related to the issue somehow, or even some of them are just parents. Yeah, one co-organizer from Portland actually said, quote, "I'm not a radical or an activist. I just reached a point where I felt I had to do more." And she's far from alone. In fact, speaking of ICE, a group of protesters led by 85-year-old liberal Rabbi Arthur Voskow managed to block the entrance to the ICE offices in Philly. Rabbi Voskow, along with 6 others, were ultimately arrested, but not before illegally barring entrance for over 2 hours. Take a look at the video from the scene.
We understand that maybe this is the second warning, or maybe you're prepared to arrest us. We understand that by the local law, what we are doing violates that, and we see it as the freest thing we can do is to submit to arrest at this moment. And we want to say to you, criminals are living in the White House who would tear away even nursing children from their mother's breasts. You are citizens as well as police officers. We invite you, we urge you, we beg you, we implore you as citizens to be aware of the criminals that are wrecking the decent lives of decent families. If you need to arrest us, so be it. But remember who the real criminals are.
It's hard to watch. Look, I mean, this entire issue is obviously really personal. I mean, it's also quickly become the most political issue of the day, and, not just in the U.S. I mean, with the latest developments on the Syrian front, a new wave of refugees are likely coming from Syria as we speak, and a lot of Israelis are even talking about saying maybe the state should be doing more than just, sending foreign aid. They think that Israel maybe should let some of those refugees actually find shelter here. That's, of course, a discussion for another day. In any case, thank you for the details on this, Aaron.
Thank you.
Moving now to an emergency on the other side of the world. Emergency services in Thailand have just entered the 8th day of rescue efforts in the search for 12 missing boys and their soccer coach. The group has been trapped in a kilometers-deep cave for over a week now after the rising tide blocked their exit during a hiking trip, and many, unfortunately, are fearing the worst. But now, Israeli services are putting boots on the ground to help, and here are the details is Uzi Hanouni, the founder and CEO of Max Tech Networks. Uzi, thank you for joining us. You guys are doing amazing work, I understand. How did you find out about this? I mean, this is in Thailand. Why did you get involved?
So actually, our agent in Thailand, Moshe Ashkenazi, called us and told us that there is such an emergency situation in Thailand. And we took all the company immediately and we put them on a plane in 12 hours with the equipment. We haven't thought about nothing, just to save those kids' life, because we understood that the only way for those rescue forces that you see there, rescue teams that you see there, to enter into this deep cave is using a resilient and good communication that can survive this tough environment.
Right.
And the communication that we provide is actually enable in non-line of sight to communicate and to provide them safe communication and voice data and video.
Right, you guys provide cutting-edge communication services. And we're going to get to this device in a minute, but you guys have someone from your organization on the ground there right now, right?
Yes, actually, one of my employees, Yuval Zalmanov, decided to take this mission on his shoulder.
Wow.
And he took the radios and the computers, whatever needed, in order to educate the teams there. And he actually involved with the rescue team. He entered into the deep cave, making sure that the equipment is working, replacing the batteries when needed at all time, and doing whatever needed in order to make it work to their satisfaction. And actually, it shows that it's working.
Wow. So tell me about this. How does this thing work?
Oh, this is very simple. It looks like
a walkie-talkie.
It looks like a walkie-talkie.
Okay.
It looks like but it's actually is a very smart device. Inside there is a very sophisticated algorithm that we developed in the last 12 years in Yavne in Israel. And this is a pure cutting-edge technology that enables devices to be relay one to another. It's highly dynamic.
So you don't need line of sight like a regular walkie-talkie. You don't need line of sight. Wow.
And it's highly dynamic. All the units have the same functionality, so you can talk, and it's using as a relay simultaneously.
Wow. So the range potentially, if you had enough links in the chain, could be endless, really.
Yeah, it's not an endless because there is a physics and delay, but you can reach up to a few kilometers with that, no problem.
That's amazing. That's great work, and you guys are doing such amazing efforts on the ground. It's amazing work you guys do. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
4 Israeli women have just shattered the glass ceiling at perhaps the country's most masculine setting, the military. For the first time in IDF history, 4 female soldiers have just been promoted to the elite rank of tank commander. They are now being deployed to head tank patrol units along the Egyptian border, setting a new bar for women in the Army. These 4 women represent the results of a successful new IDF pilot program to create an all-female tank unit. Though Israeli women are required to serve in the Army just like Israeli men, many have often criticized the IDF for failing to give those female recruits the same opportunities as men. This is often seen especially true of high-ranking positions where women statistically have far fewer, if any, positions. But these 4 female soldiers represent history in the making. They were each selected out of an initial course that saw 16 female IDF soldiers trained for tank service, Female soldiers have often been used to train tank operators, but this is the first time that they'll be commanding units themselves. The program was initially met with fierce criticism from the religious community. Former IDF Chief Rabbi Yisrael Weiss slammed the whole idea when it was first announced, accusing that if you put a male and a female soldier in a tank together for a week, you'll get, quote, a little tank soldier in another 9 months. The IDF quickly rebutted this criticism, saying that tank units will not be mixed gender for now, but perhaps the best sentiment comes from one of the new commanders herself, 20-year-old Sergeant Charlotte Fell-Davidovici, a new immigrant from the UK. She says that now she not only gets to defend her country, but gets to, quote, bring women forward in combat and open up chances for future generations, end quote, to do it. Same as any man. And we say, you go, girl. Social media and sharing networks have just changed about maybe everything about how we live our lives. So why not education too? Well, one Israeli company called TinyTap seems to think it is about time, and they've come up with an amazing new way to make education more fun and accessible than ever before. And joining me now in the studio with the details, the CEO and co-founder of TinyTap, Yogev Sheli. Yogev, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
TinyTap, what is it? And great name, by the way.
Thank you. Very short. TinyTap it's an app and a website which lets kids from all over the world play and learn from educational games created by teachers. It means that teachers can download our app and create their own interactive educational games for their classroom, but later share it so families all over the world can learn from that.
Okay, so it's like a social media game that promotes education that kids learn from, if I understand.
Yeah, but it also has a community around it, meaning the games doesn't come just from companies, it comes from real life teachers from all over the world. So if you're a family in London or in New York, you can have your kids learn and play games created by an Israeli teacher, for example.
Wow. And the language barrier is no problem, it's all in English? Or?
That's what's beautiful about the company. Yeah, it depends on the teacher's language. So you'll have content in Arabic, in Hebrew, in English, basically in almost every language.
Cool. The kids in different languages in different countries can play the same games and learn similar things. That's amazing.
Regardless of their physical limitations, whether they're based in Israel or refugee.
What are the games like? What's an example of a game?
So it's mostly geared towards younger audience from ages pre-K to the 6th grade. You'll see a lot of content about language learning because of the visual nature and auditory of TinyTap. And other than that, if you can't find the game that you were looking for, as a parent, you can also consider creating one yourself because it is a creation platform and creation is completely free, so you can make whatever you want for your family.
Wow. How'd you come up with it? How did this idea start?
The idea came from my personal need. My dad had dementia for a very long time, and I wanted for a way to take family photos and help use them to help him hold on to old memories. And I wanted a way, and I thought the best way to do that is to take those photos and make them interactive for him.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and we ended up releasing it for everyone to create content, and we saw that the education space needed it the most.
That's great. Well, we're wrapping up, but how can people find it? It's available on the market already?
Yeah, it's on iTunes and Google Play and on our website. It's completely free to download and free to create and play thousands of games.
Okay, so they just
Some
search
games
TinyTap.
cost money. It has a subscription model into it, and what's important to understand that part of that subscription money will go back to the company, and half of it will go back to the teachers who create the games.
That's great. So they got to search TinyTap, and that's how they find it.
Yeah, all you have to do is search for TinyTap.
Cool. Yogev, thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, today is a potentially historic day for Mexicans. Voting for Mexico's general election is officially underway, with the biggest turnout so far in recent memory. And with a 20-point lead in the polls, it looks like Jewish candidate Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo is about to become mayor of Mexico City. And Sheinbaum's platform represents the National Regeneration Movement, which is aligned with the left-wing presidential frontrunner Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the man who might represent either a big new change or just more of the same for Mexican voters. And here with more on this is ILTV's special correspondent on Latin American Affairs, Joy Gavijon. And Joy, I think we both know why this is such a big day in Mexico, but how does this turnout impact Israel?
Thanks, Brett. So if this is the case, if Sheinbaum Pardo wins the elections, she would be the first Jewish woman to become mayor of Mexico City. So now, there aren't many Jews in Mexico overall, only about 1% of the population, but considering that almost 75% of them are in Mexico City, the capital of Mexico, it wouldn't be too much of a surprise if she wins there.
Right.
And even though Mexico's Jewish population is relatively small, that community has very, very strong ties with the state of Israel.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think next to the United States and North America, a big slice of foreign youth movements Jewish Hebrews that come to Israel actually come a lot from Mexico City that I've seen. It's pretty crazy to hear Hebrew being spoken with a Mexican accent, by the way.
You're right.
What else can you say about Pardo herself? What's she about?
Well, throughout her campaign, she's been very open about her Jewish roots and how proud she is about it. During a rally, she explained that her grandparents are from both sides are immigrants from Lithuania and Sephardim from Bulgaria. And even though she was raised in a non-religious family, she says that she feels close to the Jewish community because of the traditions that were followed at her grandparents' home. She's also a scientist and an environmental engineer. She was a PhD student in California.
Wow.
She's a very unique candidate.
Yeah. Okay, now concerning the outcome of the presidential election, how could that potentially impact, Israel-Mexico relations? I mean, right now there's, of course, a big shared free trade agreement making Israel Mexico's biggest trading partner in the Middle East. So how could that be impacted?
Yeah, well, we also can't forget that Netanyahu was the first prime minister to pay an official visit to Mexico last year when he met with current President Peña Nieto and members of the Jewish Mexican community. So most of the candidates have stayed pretty clear from talking about Israel during their campaign, and honestly, the typical voter in Mexico probably cares a lot more about national issues like crime, corruption, and fixing the economy. So it's unclear how the new president, whoever ends up being, will really impact Israel. But I would predict that the new president will uphold the current agreements and probably try to grow relations with Israel, most likely.
Right. I mean, this is a big week for Mexicans on top of this big primary, which I think the entire world's going to be following quite closely.
Yeah.
They've got a big World Cup game coming up tomorrow, right?
You're right. They're playing tomorrow with Brazil, so we'll have to see what happens.
I know you're very excited. I can't wait to hear about it. Till then, thank you for the update, Joy.
Thank you.
All right, Israeli NBA star Omri Casspi is officially packing his bags for Memphis. Casspi became a free agent in April after being cut from the Golden State Warriors due to a leg injury. But now that the season is officially over, it didn't take too long for Casspi to find a new home. He's reportedly just closed a one-year deal to play for the Memphis Grizzlies. This begins another chapter for Israel's favorite homegrown baller. Casspi became the first Israeli native to draft in the first round of the NBA back in 2009 when he was the 23rd overall pick for the Sacramento Kings. Shortly thereafter, Casspi became the first Israeli to ever step foot and play for the NBA. Over the next decade, he was traded and drafted throughout the league, including a few seasons with the Cleveland Cavaliers, then the Houston Rockets, the New Orleans Pelicans, the Minnesota Timberwolves, before finally signing on with NBA champion the Golden State Warriors. During his time with the Warriors, Casspi scored record-high point runs, but on the eve of the Warriors' recent run at the championship, Casspi was cut from the team due to injuries. The Warriors were sad to see him go, but now that the season is officially ended, it means Casspi is legally free to pursue a new team, and clearly it didn't take long for the Grizzlies team owners to pounce on the opportunity. With his leg on the mend, hopes are high that next year Casspi might find himself on the winning side of an NBA championship game.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
Now it's time for our Hebrew word of the day. Whether you're leading a rescue effort, playing a soccer game, or, running a news desk, communication is key, guys. And that's why today's word is litaksher, which means to communicate. For the last time, no, I'm not a mind reader. So if you want to help me out, you've just gotta litaksher, communicate with me. And there's tons of ways to litaksher. You can call someone on the phone, which translates to lihitkasher, by the way, or you can litaksher with a nice postcard. I like postcards. Or you can pull a Harry Potter and use an owl to litaksher. It's a lot snazzier than a boring old email, don't you think? All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy and warm with a low of about 72 or 22 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect clear and sunny skies with little to no change in temperatures. The high is going to be around 85 or 29 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.66 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Brad Allen Smith. Thank you for watching.